Hello there, my name's Annette, Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. We've got a rainy day here where I live, and today is a perfect day to think about being out on a lake in a sailboat. What I've got for you today is a tutorial based on a foundation paper piece pattern that I designed based on a photograph taken by a friend. He gave me permission to use the photograph, and I made a cute sailboat pattern, and it's very cheerful and bright. So on this rainy day, let's tackle this sailboat pattern. Okay, let's take a look at this pattern. Here is page 1 of the pattern. It's got the image, it's got the title, but let's go ahead and skip over to page 2. So page 2 has got the sections that I've divided it into and the assembly instructions, very important. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of pattern pieces. There is one piece that overlaps 2 pages. That is piece I. Sorry, I had to get a closer look at that. So these are just going to line up. This line is where those 2 pieces will match together. And then I'll match the dotted line and the dotted line over here, and I will tape those 2 together, and that will be the right size for my piece. One of the fun parts about foundation paper piecing is choosing the fabrics you're going to use. I found this pink in my stash. It's kind of got some triangles on it. I thought, oh, that'd be kind of cool for a sail. Then I've got this orange, a plain orange, and then I've got a patterned reddish that has some orange and some yellow in it. Next, I picked a plain yellow and then just a basic black, a basic white, and I had a couple of fat quarters of this blue from Joann's. My first step in doing a paper piece pattern is to cut out all the pieces and then cut out all the fabric that I'm going to need for each piece individually. For the one piece that overlaps 2 pages, what I like to do is cut a sort of jagged line back and forth, and this makes it easier for me to match up the lines. Next, I cut out individual pieces of fabric to match each individual piece on each individual section. And when you're checking fabric to make sure it's going to fit the printed side of the pattern, if it's up, the wrong side of the fabric needs to be up when you're matching sizes. Once I have my stack of pattern pieces ready to go, I set my stitch length on my machine to 1.8 or less, and today I'm using 1.5. So I'll take you slowly through one of the sections. We've got the pink sail, we've got a lot of blue, and one piece of black. Piece 1 and piece 2 will go right sides together, and then I'm going to be stitching on a stitch line between piece 1 and piece 2, and I want at least 1/4 inch overlap. That pink sail was flopping around on me, so I put a pin in it to hold it in place. If the fabrics are light or medium tone, you can hold the paper and the fabrics up to the light, and I can see right there that my blue fabric is overlapping that stitch line, so I'm going to be good to go to stitch on this line. Next, I trimmed my excess thread. Then I folded on the stitch line and I trimmed the excess bulk away from that seam to about 1/4 inch. Next, I pressed that seam open with a dry iron. Now it was time to add piece 3, which is the black strip, and I'm going to lay my project kind of on top of that black piece. Then I'm going to fold back on that stitch line between piece 1 and piece 3 and make sure I've got overlap enough to cover the seam allowance. And once again, after stitching the seam, I trim away those excess threads. Then I fold my project on that stitch line and trim away the excess bulk. Then I press that seam open. Now it's time to add all those blue pieces, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That pink overhang was getting in my way, so I kind of cut off that edge just a little bit so it'd make it easier for me to line this piece up. And you can see I'm lining up that stitch line between piece 1 and piece 4, making sure there's at least 1/4 inch overhang for the seam allowance. Here I wanted to show you another option. I am folding back on that stitch line and trimming away the excess bulk before I add the next piece. That way I can see exactly where this piece of fabric needs to be. This works pretty well on larger pieces that are a little bit more difficult to get lined up. And here you can see I'm doing that exact same thing before I added piece 6. I folded back on the stitch line, trimmed away the excess bulk to about 1/4 inch. Then it was easy to see exactly where this next blue piece needed to be. Now it's time to add the final blue piece, piece number 7. I'm folding back on that stitch line and trimming away excess bulk. Then I'll be able to see exactly where my next blue piece needs to be. With that all pressed, here is what the finished piece looks like. I'm going to give it just a quick trim around the edges, just so you can kind of get an idea of how this sail piece is going to look in the finished project. All right, now it is time to finish the rest of these sections. Now here you get to see a mistake I made and how easy it is to actually recover from a foundation paper piecing mistake. Here you can see the side on the right is supposed to be white fabric and the little shadow of the boat is supposed to be black fabric. Well, I reversed those. I messed up. So this is pretty easy to fix in this case. Those are the first two pieces I sewed on this piece. I just pulled that paper off, taped it back together. Then I cut the seam line off of those two pieces of fabric because they were big enough that I could use the exact same pieces. I didn't have to worry about the little tiny bit I trimmed off here. Not all foundation paper piecing mistakes are this easy to fix. I have had some where I've had to completely redo a whole section because it was just too hard to take it back apart again. So just be careful, take it slow. It'll be fine, and hey, it's a piece of paper, so if you do have to start over, just print it out again and do that section over again. Not a big deal. Now that all my sections are sewn together, it's time to trim them. For small pieces, I like to just hold them in my hand and trim on the dotted line with scissors. For larger pieces, I am going to be using a ruler and a rotary cutter to trim on the dotted line. Once everything is trimmed, I look at my instructions and I just start at the beginning. This first section, I need to piece A, B, C, and D. I'm going to be putting together piece B and C, then I will add piece D, and last I will put on A. As I put these together, I like to use my clips. Then I can open up that seam before I sew it and make sure that the edges of these pieces are lining up correctly. Once I have stitched that seam line, I like to trim my threads, then I kind of finger press that back. I also like to remove any paper on an inside seam before it gets encased with yet another seam. Now I'm going to add piece D, and I get those lined up correctly, lay them right sides together, clip, and then stitch on the seam line. it's time to add that piece A for the bottom of that boat. And I did go ahead and tear away some of the paper where that seam was going to be. Once I had that clipped, I stitched the seam line, trimmed away my excess thread. I also trimmed away excess paper. Then I pressed that section. I continued following the instructions on my sheet to put sections together in the correct order, and then I completed this sailboat. But wait, there's more. I opened this part up and I realized my little pieces of the boat didn't line up. Sometimes I will leave mistakes like this, but this one was too obvious, so I decided I needed to repair it. Once I had gotten that seam ripped apart, I used some tape to get all those little fuzzies off. Then I put the two pieces back together and restitched correctly. And it's a very satisfying feeling to do that final press on the final section and finally have your block completed. This block turned out so pretty. It's bright and cheerful, and I just love it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you back real soon.